All right. It's been a morning. I am waiting in line for coffee because that seems pretty necessary. And also my daughter introduced me to this thing called muffin tops. I did not know anyone sold actual just muffin tops, which is pretty exciting. Remember the Seinfeld episode all about muffin tops? Well, it's a thing now. Anyway, welcome to Victoria Knits. I'm Victoria. And I know a lot of you have probably come over here from Allie's recommendation on Little Drops of Wonderful, and thank you. I hope you like what you see. Thank you to my regular viewers. I really appreciate you. I podcast from here in Northwest Montana. We live just about 20 miles west of the town of Kalispell. And a few weekends ago, my husband Kim and I babysat my two of my grandsons for 3 days and 2 nights while my daughter and son-in-law went and had a nice break. And it was it's exhausting watching 2 kids. I don't know how, well, you know, that was 35 years ago or something. I managed it, but it's still a lot of work, especially when there's somebody else's kids, right? So anyway, while I'm waiting for coffee, I'll let you take a look at some of the highlights from that weekend. It is my sweatshirt. I swear purple too. Something purple? Yeah. Is it my sweatshirt? Yeah. What are you singing? Shut out. I think I'll try that copper top latte, small. And do you have lemon poppy seed muffin top?
One of those? And just a 12 ounce on that?
Yes, please.
You got it.
So Allie on Little Drops of Wonderful is doing her Vlogtober. So I highly recommend you go check that out. That should be really cute. And I'm planning on going up to Glacier National Park today. I'm not going to be driving the pretty part of the road. If you want to see the beautiful part of the road, I showed that in episode 34. And then if you watch that, you can see why a lot of visitors to the park just drive that road. It's gorgeous. All right. I think we're finally on our way. I'm going to take a shorter hike today, a much shorter hike than I normally do. It's only going to be less than a 2-mile hike because I bought new hiking shoes. And normally I would say new hiking boots, but most people aren't wearing boots anymore, I guess. They're wearing hiking shoes because they're lighter. And I'll tell you what happened, what talked me into doing it. On the hike I went with my friend Janet. We went up to Pegan Pass with Janet and Carmen. When we got back after that 9-mile hike, we got back to the car and Janet said, "My feet feel like they're in slippers." Well, my feet did not feel like they were in slippers at all. My feet hurt in my hiking boots. And I thought, you know what? It must be time for some new hiking shoes. So I went out and I bought some. Yeah, they're pricey. They cost me $160. It seems like a lot. But I do remember my old hiking boots cost me over $200. So it's not that terrible. So anyway, here we go. I'm not sure what the weather looks very cloudy and overcast in the park. It might rain on me today. We'll see what happens, right? I hope it's going to be okay. Hi.
Glacier, do you have a photo ID to match?
Yes, I do.
Would you like a map or newspaper today?
No, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks. So, this is Johns Lake. Supposedly, it has a couple of peaks behind it that are really beautiful when the sky's clear. But as you can see, it's really overcast right now. They also say once in a while you'll see this is a good place to find moose. That would have been nice. So the Johns Lake Loop hike is just 1.8 miles. Has an elevation gain of just 225 feet. The highest elevation is only 3,410 feet, 3,410 feet. That's not even the elevation where we live in Marion. Trail difficulty is easy. And as I said, be sure to check out episode 34 if you're at all interested in what Glacier National Park looks like. I've done other hikes in Glacier National Park, but in episode 34 I actually show the main drive through the park, which is what most people end up doing. So, yeah, I'm sitting here at the edge of the lake. There's a lot of people in the parking lot. I've only seen 4 people on the trail so far, so that's pretty good. So let's talk about some knitting while I'm here. I'm calling these, I'm working on a pair of socks, and I'm calling these My Friendship Socks. And the reason is because my friend Lynda from the Joey Scarf podcast sent me the yarn, and it's beautiful. It's called MARIANATED. MARIANATED yarns. This is the first one of hers I've had. It's a play on marinate, of course. Her name is Marion, the person who dyes it. This yarn is called Rock Candy. Isn't that pretty? It is so nice to use. It feels so nice and soft. And the pattern I'm doing is called COLLYWOBBLES by FIBRETOWN Designs. And the pattern was also a gift from my friend Sandy in Arizona. Hi Sandy, or Sam, whichever one you prefer. And I am wearing the hat that was gifted to me by Sandy in Arizona. Can you see that? And I see an urn over there by the lake. I'm gonna have to check that out after I'm done. I'm really liking this pattern. I messed it up a little bit at the beginning. I didn't realize it had this little side thing that was supposed to continue, but it's okay. I got it started. It's right there. I did get it started on each side after a few rows. Doesn't matter. I'll try to match that on the second sock. These are going to be for me. I love this colorway. I love the pattern. It's really, really, really pretty. Thanks to both of you. And the reason Lynda sent me, well, I can't say the reason Lynda sent me that yarn, but Lynda sent me that yarn, and she sent it along with something she posted on Instagram and asked if anybody wanted any of these darning tools. And I said, yeah, I'll take one. She said, all you have to do is pay for the postage. Well, she didn't even make me pay for that because it was in the States, but she sent along that yarn. So now, guess what I need to do? I got a bunch of socks that need darning. I'm going to insert a video here. All the socks I've been saving that have holes in them. If anyone knows of any good darning videos or blogs or whatnot, places to go look up how to darn socks, I would really appreciate you leaving a comment about that, because now I feel like I have no excuse not to, right? Here they are. Here's my little darning tool. And I have a lot of socks that need darning, as you can see, but I have also thrown away a lot of socks in the past that I should have kept just because they needed darning. So it was ridiculous to let them go. Oh, another project I have going is the mystery shawl with CECILIA LOSADA. She's the one that I bought that pattern, the mail-in tee, and I gave that away on my last podcast. Well, she said she was doing a mystery shawl, and I thought, yeah, what the heck, I'll try it again. I did one mystery shawl before, wasn't that impressed with it, but I'm going to try this one. So she did promise that the pattern was going to be really simple, that it was not going to be anything complicated. And so far, she's been truthful about that. Now, I'm going to blast your eyes out here. Look at that. Look at those colors. It's got some garter ridge going. This will have to be blocked, this little end piece. But it's got lots of garter ridge going and some yarn overs in it. I think it's going to be really pretty. So the yarns I'm using, you needed 2 skeins of fingering yarns. And she's only up to clue 2. So if you wanted to jump on board with this, you can. And I'll link to it below. So the yarns I'm using are both by HANAMADEIT. They're on what she calls GLAM lamb, because they have sparkles. I hope you can see the sparkles. The pink one is called I Heart Corals. And this other one was a gift to myself. It was her April Naughty Minded colorway. And I've been looking for something to do with those, and I thought, you know, I like pink, and winter is coming, and so why not knit something really bright and pretty for winter? It will be, won't it? So so far I've kept up with her clues, but we'll see as we go along how that goes. I'll have to keep an eye behind me and see if those clouds ever drift off. It's quite cloudy today in the park. But it's really pretty. It's really pleasant. It's a really nice hiking weather is what it is. Okay, and my other whip is I actually got started on the Malin Tee by CECILIA LOSADA, also by her. I had to figure out how to do a twisted German cast on, and it's, you know, it seems complicated when you look at the video, and it kind of is. I won't blame anybody for struggling with it, because I certainly did. I think I had to look at 3 different videos in order to get it figured out. The third or 4th video finally clicked for me. I'm used to doing what they call that slingshot cast on, but I only do it from one end. I don't do the long tail. Well, for this cast on, you do what they call long tail, and so you're using both ends. You're using the end that you've strung out, and then you're also using the end that comes in from your skein of yarn. It took me a while to figure that one out, because I was just getting a knot. I got all through the motions 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they would say tighten it up, and I tightened it up, and I just had a knot. So don't give up if you're trying to learn the twisted German cast on. You can do it. I was a little frustrated. I don't know why that is. I guess I want to pick things up really quickly. Sometimes I just don't want to spend a lot of time learning something. Are you like that? I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a symptom of I feel like time's too short. But anyway, I got it. I'm proud I got it. And here's the result. So this is the cast on edge right here. You probably can't tell a whole lot from that. But what she also does is, this is the front and this is the back. So she has you do some German short rows. I think that's nice. I've made that sweater by Tin Can Knit so many times, the Flax Light, but they don't do any short rows. Now, maybe the next time I do one, if I do another one, I'll just add short rows, because you can do that, right? I might do that. So anyway, I'm going on this one. The yarn is Juniper Moon Farm, is the blue-gray one. It's Harriet Fine colorway Lakeville. I think it's really pretty. It's mostly alpaca, and it feels like it's 75% alpaca. It's really nice and soft. And the brown is Big Sky Yarn Co.'s Tennessee Whiskey, which I might stop by the yarn store today and see if they have another mini skein of that, or a 50-gram skein. What I'm really liking is this little pattern that's turning out for the yoke. Isn't that interesting? I hope you can see that. I think that's going to be really pretty. I'm really looking forward to this. Yeah. Did I swatch for this? Did someone ask if I swatched for this? No, I didn't swatch for this. Because, you know, I could say something bad about myself right now, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it at that. I did not swatch for this. I'm doing size 5. I did do the smallest neck because I could tell that how she had her neck going, it was going to be wider than I wanted. And now I was thinking just yesterday, oh gosh, I don't have any finished objects to show you, but I do. And if Casey, my son Casey and Ivy are watching this podcast, they need to turn away now. Turn away, don't watch this part. You don't want to, it's spoiler alert, right? You don't want to know. I'll put down at the bottom where you should jump to, Casey and Ivy, if you're watching. I don't think they watch it much anymore, and I get that. But if they are, I want them to look away. So, oh, look at this. I have some Christmas knitting finished. These socks will be for my daughter-in-law, Ivy. And I am using Biscotte yarn Green Bay colorway. And if you've watched this podcast very much, you know my son is a huge Green Bay fan. Big Green Bay fan. I am just doing a simple ribbing all the way up. And that white yarn that I bought at Brave Dog Knits, I'm using for the heels, toes, and cuffs. The yarn is super soft. Biscotte yarn is very nice. And I'm liking these. I have yet to start my son's pair, but I decided I would start from the smallest pair up. So I have finished a pair for Perry, my little grandson Perry. He'll turn 3 in, good grief, in November. That's crazy. And then I've finished Hayden's socks. My granddaughter Hayden, she just turned 5. And hers are finished. And so I just have to get going on my son's pair. And, you know, there's a little bit of Christmas knitting happening behind the scenes. So I'm happy about that. So the other day I was looking on Instagram, and I was looking at the Instagram stories. And KARYN from SSK Yarners had a story on there about how she makes her sock blanks. She has an Etsy shop, and she sells yarn and sock blanks. And I was fascinated by the trouble she goes to. And so, of course, you know what's coming. I had to order one. It was a toss-up between the wine color blank and this beautiful fall one. But this one had sparkles, so I went for that one. I went for the fall one. Isn't that pretty? She hand paints this stuff on there. I don't know. Maybe all of the sock blank creators do. Yeah, it's pretty impressive though. That's a lot of work. This is a single, which is what I prefer because I do not like to knit socks 2 at a time. And so that worked out perfectly for me. Yeah, it's 75% superwash merino and 20% nylon. And I think Jan Swarbrick of Jan's Crafty Crochet is planning on sending me, let me wrap this up. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. I think Jan is planning on sending me another pattern of hers to try. So maybe I might hold on to that yarn for that. And speaking of patterns, Becky Wilson didn't ever contact me about having won the Granny Jean sock pattern. And so I decided I would give away in this podcast one pattern to Granny Jean's socks and one pattern of the Adeline socks, both by Jan Swarbrick. So leave a comment under the YouTube video or in my Ravelry group and let me know which one you're interested in winning. If you want to be entered for both patterns, just say both in your comment. Now I'm not going to pick, I won't pick the same person to win both patterns. So 2 people are going to win. And so, yeah, enter for that little giveaway. I'll throw up a picture here of of each sock pattern, just so you can be reminded of what they are. So, what I've been watching No Offense, which is another British police drama. It has 3 seasons. I really enjoyed that show. I thought it was, thought it was pretty interesting. It was kind of fun. I also recently noticed that Doc Martin is back with season 9. We can all watch what grumpy Doc Martin is up to again. And I've been watching Safe on Netflix. That show had some surprises in it, which I really enjoy. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. So if you want to get a hold of me, I am Victoria Jean on Ravelry, Victoria Jean W on Instagram. You can email me at vjwilliams54@gmail.com. The Ravelry group is Victoria Knits. And I want to thank all my new subscribers, especially Susan and Essex, with whom I've been private messaging. Some of you have been watching my old podcasts and leaving comments on them, which has caused me to go back and re-watch them. It's been a walk down memory lane, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Sometimes I think, what was I thinking in that podcast? But, you know, hindsight and all that. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is thank you very, very much. Big thank you to all those who have been on board with me from the beginning and are still sticking with me. It's great. So I'm going to continue on this little hike. There's supposed to be a waterfall coming up, so I'll do some video of that. Gosh, it'd be nice if this weather cleared up and showed those mountains, but I don't think it's going to. I think we're out of luck today, but it's still pretty out here. It's been a nice little hike. The air, I wish you could smell the air. It's so nice. All right, well, yeah, I'm going to say goodbye from here. I'll follow this up, like I said, with a few more pics, maybe of the waterfall, a little video of the waterfall, but that's going to be it. And there's a lot more in this podcast. There's no more knitting. If you're only interested in the knitting, we're done. That's pretty much it. But I've done a lot of other recording, and you can hang in there and watch all of that. It's up to you, of course, obviously. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Goodbye from Montana, and I hope I see you next time. Bye. I wish I could get it behind me. It's really pretty. So if you've watched this podcast, a few episodes of this podcast, you're aware that I really like to podcast outdoors in all kinds of weather and in all different kinds of places. But outdoors is my first love. And you may have been wondering why that is. I found a story that I think really talks to that. And it is by the author and my friend, Chris Latreille. And it is in this book, Awake in the World, Volume 2. And his story is called No Distractions. And I'd like to read it to you now. My first bear encounter involved a black bear I wasn't present to see. It was decades ago, in the late 70s, when I was maybe 10 or 12. Extended family were visiting from Louisiana, and the adults had gone out to dinner at a storied local restaurant located some score or so miles west of Missoula, Montana, called the 9 Mile House, a historic old building and establishment which, sadly, in recent years, burned to the ground. We lived not so far away from the place, in a single wide trailer with an addition, 6 Mile Creek twisting through our backyard. It was a beautiful location, under the shadow of Edith Peak, where the remnants of an old fire lookout could still be found. It was deeply rural, off the beaten path, and a wonderful place to grow up. The bear was seen at twilight as the adults were making their way home from dinner. They watched the timbered hillsides bordering the twisting, dusty dirt road that led back to our house, most likely hoping to see whitetail or maybe elk. They saw the bear making its way quickly across an open meadow. When they got home, everyone was excited about what they'd seen, eager to share it with us kids. Seeing bears then, as now, wasn't something that happened every day. The sighting is meaningful to me because my cousin, only just met and roughly my same age, was terrified at the idea of a bear being anywhere nearby. My sisters and I set to teasing her. Our house was entered via a covered porch with a sliding glass door that opened onto the living room. We told my cousin the bear sighting was no big deal because bears would regularly approach in the night to scratch and snuffle at the glass in a bid to find a way inside. We even pointed to smudges on the glass as proof, actually the nose marks of our dogs. This was false, of course, and I don't know that any of us had ever seen a bear at that point. I certainly hadn't. But my urban-raised cousin was terrified, certain she'd be dragged out into the darkness of night and killed. As hysterics approached, we assured her we were only kidding. This was not intended to make her feel better, but so we wouldn't get in trouble. Still, despite our reassurances, piled up as she was in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, mere feet from that glass portal, the thinnest barrier between her and horrific death, I can't imagine my cousin spent a very restful night. In the years since I lived with my parents on 6 Mile Creek, I've seen plenty of bears. Plenty of other critters too. Perhaps the greatest gift the folks bestowed on me was an interest and appreciation for spotting wildlife. My dad wasn't a hunter, but he loved to watch the animals. Same with my mom. We would take drives up the road on summer evenings to watch deer, hundreds of them, emerge from the pines to graze in open hayfields as the day cooled. Gaining elevation, driving past the old 6 Mile ranger station and deeper up into the 9 Mile, we would look for elk. Despite there being a sizable resident herd, seeing them was infrequent enough that when it happened, when we might come around a corner and there they'd be, bedded down by the 10s and 20s in the deep grasses just off the road, It was magical. On one specific instance, we were forced to stop while, from my youthful perspective, what seemed an endless mass of them crossed the road during a heavy rainfall. I heard the huffing of their breath, and the smell of their wet hides entered our car through open windows and filled the space with wild, musky odor. "40 years or more later, I don't love the sight of wildlife any less. I find it becomes all the more meaningful, more stirring, the older I get. This morning as I write, I keep glancing to my left, where darkness outside the window is brightening to day, and I see birds arriving at my feeders in 2s, 3s, and 4s. There's a trio of Oregon juncos there now, tiny and skittish in their movements, huddled in a bush with branches thick with hoarfrost, and I adore them. No meathead ever posed next to a slain northern flicker, but to me they are no less wild and magnificent than a moose, and I'm thrilled to know that several will arrive any moment. I look to the treetops and beyond to scan as much of the sky as I can see from here. There might be a flock of ducks or geese whirring by, and I don't want to miss them. A bald eagle could come soaring through the neighborhood, not 2 stories above the ground, to check things out. I know that this is a possibility because I've witnessed one doing that on more than one occasion. I like to imagine them being as curious of me and my attention as I am of them. Certainly the crows and ravens and magpies are, and I won't be told otherwise. I have seen an uncountable number of deer, mostly whitetail. I still tend to gasp and point, "There's a deer," when I see one, especially if I have a companion. I think that's pretty common among those of us who lean on inconsistent paychecks just so we can live in the West. The wonder of it all, even after repetition. On my almost daily drive into town, I'm eager to see what I might witness over the dozen or so miles I have to cover. All kinds of raptors and corvids. The deer I've mentioned, and I've seen coyotes and foxes as well. Great blue herons overhead, staking out a spot in the roadside irrigation ditch, or maybe even hunting voles in the open fields. I've seen sandhill cranes too. This wild potential keeps the drive interesting, and my speed down as a result. Nothing makes me crankier than someone blowing by me oblivious, especially if they seem distracted by some electronic device. It happens all too often. Distraction. Is that all anyone wants anymore? To be distracted from the world around us, from our day-to-day lives? Do we really need to be constantly entertained through the manufactured world? Do we really want to be nothing more than a product to be sold to advertisers? I know I don't want that. I want to sink into the world and become hyper-aware of what is going on around me. Settling into it is like staring at those weird 3D pictures that pop up now and then, usually in truck stop gift shops and the like, that have an image hidden within that isn't immediately apparent. To see it, one must relax a little, gaze indirectly, maybe rely on peripheral vision. Then, as if by magic, suddenly there it is. And once you see it, you can't not see it. That's how an intimate relationship with the natural world gets hold of us. Just relax, let it happen. It may take a little time, but it's worth it. When it gets you, it really gets you. Wildlife often seem to appear that way, suddenly, spectacularly. There have been moments I would swear an animal just arrived, poof, in a space I'd only moments before been staring into, unseen. A great horned owl on the thick branch of a ponderosa pine, a mountain lion in the crook of a tree, glancing down, bored, as if nothing could be less interesting to it than my upward gaze. A stump along a riverbank that starts to amble along, revealing itself to be a black bear. Never mind the multitude of stump wildlife, typically bears, I've witnessed, that really were only stumps. A stick in the trail twitches, turns into a snake, and shimmies away into the undergrowth. Sometimes we note wild presence via our other marvelous, underused senses. It's referenced so often as to be almost cliché, especially among northerners. But the lonely cry of a loon across a lake is like nothing else heard in nature. I'm particularly stirred by the yips and cries of the neighborhood coyotes when they swell up out of the darkness on summer nights. Standing in a meadow in thickening dusk, listening to owls call from all directions surrounding me, and I'm enraptured. My wife and I were on a hike deep in the woods one autumn when we heard the crack and crunching of some large animal moving through the underbrush near the trail. I readied my can of bear spray, and she stood behind me. We were both a little frightened, but also thrilled. A sensation started with a low rumble that we felt as much as heard, like it came up out of the ground and through our legs and guts and vibrated our spines. It was a bull elk, and it cranked up an epic bugle that seemed to shake the air around us. Its call ascended a scale of rich tones and culminated in a high, piercing whistle. It was a matter of seconds that felt like they lasted all afternoon. Then the bull moved off, and we never actually saw it. That's the other amazing and a little frightening thing about wildlife, especially the larger varieties, their ability to disappear. It's one thing to stare at, say, a forest of low mesquite trees full of birdsong and not see a single bird, as I recently did on a hike in the Sonoran Desert. But to be eyes on a bear and realize it has noticed you as well, and then with a whirl and a sprint, it is simply gone. Sometimes it can happen so fast that it makes one question if maybe the brain is engaging in a little gaslighting of the eyes. Did you see that? No, you didn't, or did you? I could put on another pot of coffee and sit back to rhapsodize at length on all these various encounters I've had. I'm not unusual in that. My tribe of people are always happy to share stories and listen to stories and gasp and smile, all in knowing appreciation of the wonders found in the natural world around us. The out of doors is our cathedral, no matter how and where we find it. The stories we tell are holy scriptures related directly to us on the very breath of God. This is no hyperbole. I don't even care if your vision of God is the same as mine. I doubt it is. All I know is that I feel in the depths of my spirit, in my soul, things I also don't have a definition for. That when I am in the presence of the wild world and its denizens therein, that I am in the presence of the divine. It is as simple as that. The made world seems to wage a relentless campaign to convince me otherwise, to get me to notice other things, to put time in front of a flickering screen as a higher priority than sitting on a riverbank. But I would rather live in a hut with nothing but the clothes on my back than ever surrender. So yeah, I can really relate to what Chris said about enjoying wildlife and nature and how important being outside is. I did not grow up with the same experiences as he did. I was born in Idaho, the state of Idaho, in a very rather small town. There were about 20,000 people in it. It was pretty small. But my father loved to get outside. He was the one that really loved to get out, and he took us camping, us kids. There were 5 of us. He took us camping as often as possible. It was, towards the end, it was mostly my brother and I that went with him. My brother was 5 years younger than I was, still is. And we went with my dad a lot. I won't say that the camping trips were entirely enjoyable. I will say they were very bittersweet. My father was, okay, I'll just say it. My father was an alcoholic. He drank a lot. And when we would go camping with him, his object was to get as far away from people as possible. So he did not like to camp in regular campgrounds. No, he liked to find the out-of-the-way places where no one else was, so we were very alone. It was usually at least a 2-hour drive to get there, and he would drink the entire way. And the road was, for quite a bit of it, the road was a drop-off cliff on one side and a cliff straight up on the other side. Very few turnouts. It was mostly a one-track road. So that was quite a bit of it. So why I'm telling you this is I never really felt safe when I was out camping with my father. And so it was not the most pleasant experience. But I did learn quite a bit about the outdoors, not as much as I would have liked, and that's why I've been interested in those Becoming an Outdoors Woman classes, because they help me to see the things I do know and a lot of the things that I am not aware of and should be aware of. It would be better to be aware of safety issues and how to take care of yourself outdoors. And that fear affected me a lot in the rest of my life. And it made it difficult to enjoy the outdoors as I would have liked. I spent a lot of time trying to overcome that fear when I would go camping as an adult. For instance, with my first husband, he loved to camp too. And he also did not like to camp in regular campgrounds. And so I would feel overwhelmed with fear quite often. And it was kind of like a panic attack. And sometimes I would even burst into tears. And he nor I really understood what was going on. But as an older woman, as a grandmother, I feel more comfortable outdoors, and I think I'm getting, I think I've gotten past a lot of the fear I had, and now I feel like I can't get outside enough. And I really do enjoy it. It is a very peaceful place to be for me. And yeah, I had a bittersweet relationship with my father also, because as much as I was afraid of him, and as much as I grew up feeling that I was not loved because I was the 4th daughter, and he and my mom continued to try to have a son even after miscarriages. They continued to try for that, that golden boy, which they eventually obviously got. And I don't know if that feeling came from anything they did. It may have been, just something I interpreted that was not there. But it doesn't really matter. I grew up feeling that way. And so that affected my life quite a bit too. And it has taken me a long time and sorting through a lot of issues to finally, a little bit at least, get to the point where I feel like I do deserve a place on this planet. And yeah, and so it hasn't been an easy road for me. No one has ever asked me about my tattoo that I have on my arm, which I know shows up a lot. Oh, see if I can show it to you. Yeah, it shows up a lot when I'm knitting and whatnot, and in my podcasts when I wear short sleeves. That tattoo is there to remind me mostly of how much my dad did love me. My parents have passed. They passed many, many years ago. I was in my 30s when my father died. But on one of those famous camping trips, I was about 12 years old, and I was bitten by a rattlesnake while my father and I were out fishing. And my little brother was there. And we were 2 hours drive from a hospital. And I'll never forget the way my father panicked. Well, he didn't panic, but he was very fearful. And he immediately did what he thought was right. He took a knife and he stabbed the bite, and he tried to suck the poison out, which is not recommended at all anymore. He did this knowing that he had open sores in his mouth, and he was willing to risk himself to try to save me. He put a tourniquet on my leg and he got an ice pack. We drove to a ranger station to see if there was a possibility of getting me helicoptered out. They said there wasn't. So he drove the 2 hours back to the hospital. Boise was the closest hospital. And he stopped. There was a mail truck that came up that road. It was the Middle Fork of the Boise River between Boise and Atlanta. And he drove that road. He stopped the mail truck. He practically forced them off the road, and he told them, you know, if his truck breaks down on the way to Boise, that they need to take me to the hospital. It's hard to remember all that stuff, but you don't do that for someone that you don't love and cherish. Anyway, I got my big old snake tattoo because that whole incident, I needed to be reminded of that, and I really love my tattoo. And yeah. After we got back from the hospital, and the doctor said they wouldn't give me the antivenom because it was about as bad as a snake bite, and just take me home and watch for tracks coming up my leg from the bite. And I remember my sisters, after that incident, were always like, "Oh, you're Dad's favorite. You're obviously Dad's favorite." That's always been kind of a defining moment in my life. There's a lot of stories I could tell you about camping with my dad and the danger he often put me through. So it's kind of to me it's a little mini miracle that I'm actually out here in the woods talking to you. I am hearing some creaking around me, and I'm pretty sure it's chipmunks and squirrels. I did see some moose scat down there, and thanks to the bow program now I know what moose scat looks like, so that was pretty exciting. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed me reading that story to you. I love the way Chris looks at the world, Chris Latray. My father was a hunter, and so a lot of my time with him was spent out hunting various things. He hunted just about everything. And he did not, most life he did not hold very dear. My father was in the Bataan Death March during World War II in the Philippines. His older brother died during that march. My father often said that the reason his older brother died was lack of medical care. Dad was transferred to ships and shipped to Japan, where he spent 3 years in a prisoner of war camp and worked in a factory in Japan. And so I'm sure all that has affected him. It's not an excuse for anything. It's not an excuse for drinking too much. It's not an excuse for not valuing life. He acted out in his life as though life itself was not very precious. But I think it had the opposite effect on me. I feel like life is very, very precious. Anyway, I just wanted to share Latrey's story and a little bit of mine, so maybe you can understand a little more where I'm coming from. So I hope you enjoyed Chris Latrey's short story. I really like it. I have been reading through the rest of the book, and I'm really enjoying it. And he was also in volume 1 of the same book, so I recommend you go check that out too. So anyway, thanks so much for listening. I've been trying to come up with a good explanation for what has recently happened here, and I'm not really finding a good one. So I'll just start out. I don't know how much you know about chickens and ducks. I didn't know much until we got some, and if you've watched this podcast, you've seen that we have some chickens and we have 2 ducks. The average lifespan of a chicken is around 8 years old. We have a 10-year-old chicken right now named Ginger. She's 10. Hazel is 7 years old. Butterscotch, Bonbon, and Brownie, we all got at the same time 1.5 years ago. The 2 Chicolettas we got last year from our neighbor, and those who've been watching this podcast know that there used to be 3 Chicolettas. There's only 2 now, because some predator got one of the Chicolettas. That was in June 19th. We found what was left of one of the Chicolettas. There wasn't much there, just feathers. It was quite sad. And so what we did because of that was we started putting them all to bed much earlier, like 2 hours earlier than they would have liked to go, and that seems to have done the trick. We haven't lost any since then. Brazil, one of our chickens, died this year just from old age, and last year we lost one of our ducks, Blue, because of some neighbor dogs came over and attacked and killed him. And then we have the 2 ducks, the female duck Marion, which you've seen if you've watched this podcast, and the male duck Huck. They're both a 1.5 years old. So what happened was, I don't know if you know much about chickens. As I said, I didn't know much when we first got ours. I didn't realize that you don't have to have a rooster for chickens to lay eggs. No, they'll lay eggs without a rooster. The requirement, the only thing the rooster does is fertilize those eggs. So if you want baby chicks, you get a rooster. And there's the possibility of getting some. And I tell you all that about our chickens because I'm trying to make the case for us needing some replacement birds. You know, Ginger being 10 years old, Hazel being 7. They're getting up there. Yeah, we knew we'd need to replace at least 2 of them. Well, what happened was, there's such a thing called a broody hen. Now, we had never experienced a broody hen before. Well, this year, Brownie decided that she was going to get all broody, which means they lay on eggs. They sit on eggs all day long. They come off, she comes off the eggs a couple times a day to get something to eat and drink and peck around a little bit, take a dust bath. But for the most part, she wants to lay on those eggs. Now, the chicken eggs she's laying on are not going to hatch because we don't have a rooster. But she managed to get 2 duck eggs into her nesting box. I suspect she didn't put them in there. I suspect Marion, our duck, got them in there. And so Brownie started laying on those, trying to hatch them out. Nobody knows why hens go broody. People don't like it because when they're broody, they won't lay eggs. That's not really a concern for us. We get plenty of eggs. So then the next thing that happened in this long little saga is Marion, our duck. I couldn't find her one afternoon, and when I went looking for her, I found her sitting on a nest of about 9 eggs that she had laid out in the woods, like under a pine tree. And I thought, well, she was under them. She was, I'll show you a video. She was hissing at me. She was trying to protect those eggs. Well, there's no way she was going to hatch them because she couldn't sit on them at night. And it's, you know, they've got to be warm. It's too chilly at night. She doesn't get to come out of the coop. Don't you two, huh? They have to be in their coop at night to protect them from predators. That's pretty obvious around here. And so it wasn't going to work. So I thought, well, I'll help her out. I'll put them in a box. I put them in the eggs in a box with a bunch of straw, and I put it closer to our shed / garage because I thought, well, maybe she'll sit on them if I get them closer to the shed. She'll stay interested in them, and then we can eventually get that box into the coop so she can lay on them at night. No, as soon as I moved them, she was over it. She would not touch those eggs. She went off and did whatever she does with her boyfriend Huck, and it was a done deal. So I don't know. I had this bright idea that it might be fun, so I took 3 of those duck eggs and I tucked them under Brownie. Brownie already had 2 duck eggs under her, and so I tucked 3 more under her. And Kim and I talked about it, and we said, well, we know we are going to need to add to our group of poultry. So why not, you know, let Brownie do the foster mother thing, and she can hatch out some duck eggs for us. You know, we never thought we'd get 5 for 5, but we did. Yeah. So the first one hatched. When was that? Let me look at my notes. The first one hatched on September 23rd. It was a very cute little duck. Those ducklings are something else. I have to quote my daughter here. My daughter says, those unplanned pregnancies, you know. It's like, yeah, I do know now. And I will, in this long story, I just want to remind you that I will link to a blog below where I finally went and looked up information about first-time mothers hens and how there is a danger of them injuring or killing their babies. So Yeah, so the first duckling hatched on September 23rd. We thought everything was going along fine. The weather turned nasty that weekend and or that week, and so I thought, well, we're going to need to bring them in. So the first thing we did was we put Brownie and her 4 leftover eggs and the 1 chick into a dog kennel. We put them left them inside the coop, and we wrapped it up with blankets. There's no wind in the coop. It's well protected from the wind and the rain and all that kind of stuff, but it gets chilly out there. And you shouldn't put a heat lamp in your chicken coop because the possibility of starting a fire is very real, and I have read horror stories of people whose coops started on fire due to them feeling sorry for their chickens and keeping a heating lamp in there, and then they end up with a bunch of dead chickens. Chickens are able to keep themselves warm. They need to not have the wind on them, and they need to not get wet. If you can avoid those 2 situations, they can usually weather lots of cold weather, and ours certainly have proven that. So anyway, we moved Brownie and her 1 baby and the leftover 4 eggs into a kennel with a lot of straw underneath them and surrounded with blankets. So that worked well the first day. And then that night, of course, I lay in bed and I'm all like, oh, poor Brownie and her poor chicken, and you know, they're going to be too cold. And so I had this bright idea. We bring them in the house and put them in our bathroom. Well, we did that. Well, I don't know what caused it. Maybe it was like this article said. Hens aren't naturally good mothers. Maybe after the first set of eggs they hatch, they might become good mothers, but sometimes they just don't really get it. They like to hatch the eggs, but they're not especially thrilled with what shows up afterwards. So we brought the whole kennel in the house with Brownie in it. My idea was that way we can help keep the eggs warm and the chicken warm. We'll put a lamp on top of that kennel, and then we'll put Brownie outside occasionally and let her take a rest. Well, as you can see, Brownie started rejecting that first duckling. It was really sad to see. I did not enjoy that at all. So, yeah. Brownie and the 4 eggs went back out into the nesting box, into the coop, and we kept that little duckling in the house. Now, chickens and ducks, they are flocking animals. They do not like to be alone. You should never adopt 1. You probably shouldn't adopt 2. You should always get them in groups of 3s, and we have always done that, at least 3 at a time. And this little duckling was very, very, very lonely. So I ended up having to care for that thing, and we kept watching those other eggs under Brownie. Every day we would go out and check them because it was pretty exciting. This is the first time we had done this. That poor little duckling needed a lot of attention. She really did. And that's exhausting. I'll show you some pictures here of what I went through. Yeah, the first couple days of their life, they're very needy. They need to be kept at around 85 to 90 degrees, and so they really need a light over them. And we did that for her, but she also needed a lot of company. So I would hold her quite a bit. And yes, I got pooed on a few times, but they're tiny, tiny little poos. Barely the size of my little fingernail. I don't even think they're that big. And not very messy yet. So, yeah. She was on me a lot. There was one night our power went out for 4 hours one night. It was like 20 degrees outside. This was just recently, yeah. It's probably about, okay, I might be exaggerating. It might have been 20, 25 degrees outside that night. It was cold. It was chilly in the house. So, the duckling's light went out. Guess who got brought into bed with me? Yeah. I didn't get much sleep that night. Try sleeping with a baby duckling. I was so afraid I was going to roll over and crush that thing. But she was really good. She snuggles up on me. Oh, yeah. It's exhausting, though. It's really exhausting. So that went on for about a week. And then finally, the the next Monday, a week after the first one hatched, we finally got number 2. And I'll show you the first and second one together, and you can see how much growth there was in that first duckling over just a week's worth of life. And I have decided, you know, the first chickens we got, we always named them in groups. The first 3 chickens we got, we named Tootsie, Ginger, and Jelly Bean. And then we went with names of nuts like Brazil, Hazel, and Peanut. And then for the ducks, I went with Berries, Marion, Huck, and Blue. And then for the last few chickens we got, I named them as for Sweets, Bonbon, Brownie, and Butterscotch. But this group of ducks, I decided I was just going to go crazy and name them whatever I felt like. So I've named the oldest one Lilia, and the second one I named Phoebe, and you might recognize who those 2 are named after. Lilia has turned very sweet, and she every morning I would let her out of her cage before her siblings came, and she would come running and let me pick her up, and she was very, very happy to see me. And she stopped doing her little cheep, 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 cheep. It was pretty pathetic sounding when she did that. She would do that a lot during the night. Yeah, we got to listen to a lot of that. They do not like to be by themselves. So I'll show you video of some of the chicks coming out of the eggs. We had never been this close to this kind of thing before. It was really exciting to see. I really enjoyed watching all of this. And Russell really enjoyed it too. He got a big kick out of it. Every time he came home from school, we would talk about, oh, I see another hole in one of the eggs. One of the eggs is going to hatch. Well, all the last 4 eggs all hatched on the same day, which I found really crazy. The timing of it, I did not expect. And so we have finished naming them. I asked Russell to pick name number 3, and he picked Freezy. Now, I'm not sure how to spell that because I can't tell from Russell's speech whether it has a Z in it or an S, but he picked Freezy. I have no idea where he got that name. It was pretty cute. I have no idea where he got it. But I asked him about it one day, and he came up with that name, and then I asked him the next day what he was sure he wanted to name the next duckling, and he said Freezy again. So number 3 was Freezy. And then after that, he said, well, you name one, Grandma. It's your turn. And so I says, okay, well, I'm going to name the next one Rose. And Rose is after another little girl I think is really sweet. And that is HANAMADEIT's daughter. Hi, Hannah. So one of them is named for her. And then I told Russell he could name the 5th duck. And this is the name he came up with. I don't know. Quonkadunk. Quonkadunk. And he came up with that name, and he came up with it twice in a row. 2 days in a row. He had the same name, Quonkadunk. I usually have to look at the name because I can't keep that in my head, Quonkadunk, but that's it. And his dad, my son-in-law Chris, told Russell, he says, that's a pretty long name, maybe you ought to come up with something else. And I'm like, nope, Quonkadunk is what it is. That's what they're going to be. So it's Lilia, Phoebe, Freezy, Rose, and Quonkadunk. And now we really have our hands full. We did not expect 5 out of 5. You know, I've read lots of blog posts from people who did not, when they had eggs hatch, and they would die the next day and whatnot, and the babies just would not survive. But yeah, they're all doing really well, as you can see from all these videos. So my job has been to try to tame them all down. Nico's pretty cute because yesterday I was babysitting him, and I would try to keep one of the little ducklings right here behind my neck. I don't have them in there now. It's too chilly out here. It's only like 50 degrees out right now, and it's overcast, so it's not even nice and sunny. It's not warm at all, and they wouldn't like that. But when I'm sitting and knitting or watching TV, I try to keep one right here and they snuggle up. And Nico came over to me and he was like, "Duck, duck, where's your baby duck, Grandma?" It was pretty funny. Brownie, I have to say, Brownie did do a really good job of keeping them warm. This was all new to us, and I swear you almost had to run your fingers through Brownie's feathers on her breast to find those baby ducklings, because she would have them tucked so far into her feathers. They were between feather layers and right next to her breast skin, so they could really stay warm. She was taking good care of them, at least for a while. And we let her keep, I think number 4, we let her keep that out there in the coop with her during the day, just so maybe she could feel like she'd accomplished something. But there was no way we could let her keep them. Especially, we would have to move her down from where she is, and we would have to set up a whole, there'd have to be a whole warming system. She couldn't take them out and show them how to eat and drink right now and any of that. But Lilia, at only a week older, seems to be the I was going to say mother hen, but mother duckling right now. And all 4 of them have followed her lead, and they are eating and drinking and sleeping under their little lamp. And they're all huddled together, and they're very quiet now. You don't hear that pathetic little cheep, cheep, cheep. They're very happy, and they all huddle up together, and they're really cute to watch. Now it's going to be a challenge from now on, because the weather is chilly, so we won't be able to let them go outside into the coop until they're well feathered out. But ducks grow very quickly, much faster than chickens. So we're thinking, I haven't looked up to see how long it took our last ones to go outside, but probably a month. But, they're messy birds. They're quite messy birds. But, so it'll be a challenge. And we might have to put a little addition onto our coop to make room for them all. Because ducks, of course, sleep on the ground. They do not roost on bars like chickens, because they don't have those nice talony claws to hang onto a roosting bar. They just have their webbed duck feet, and they do not roost. So they lay on the ground on straw at night, and that's where they like to sleep. They are pretty weather worthy, though. Ducks are better at adapting to heat and cold than chickens are. So that part's good. I'm trying to comfort myself with the fact that we have 5 new ducks. And I'm also hoping that we'll get at least 3 females to lay eggs. We won't know that until they get big enough and they get that male tail curl on them. Also, their sound is different. Marian has more of a honking sound than Huck does. They sound very different when they quack. So we'll be finding all of that out, and the naming may have to change when we know what sex they are, boys or girls. But there is a way you can check the sex, and we read up about it on the internet, but it sounded way too risky. We did not want to risk harming them permanently in any way, and they are what they are, so it doesn't really matter at this point, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's the whole duck and chicken wrap up. Brownie is still sitting on some eggs, but we won't let her hatch anything else. We'll continue to pull any eggs out from under her, especially duck eggs, because those are the only fertile ones we have, as I said. And she's just going to have to get over it herself, I guess. She does come off the nest, off the nesting box, and she runs around and eats and drinks, so I don't think she's really at risk. She's just not laying any eggs, and like I said, that's no big deal. So gosh, nature took its course. We helped it along a little bit, and you will see updates on all of this.
your head out, you put your head in and shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about. You put your whole self in, you put your whole self out, you put your whole self in and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what.
Now put your left foot in, you put your left foot out, you put your left foot in and you shake, 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 shake. You do the hokey pokey and jump around. Everybody jump around. You put your right hand, you put your right hand out, you put your cheek. You do the hokey pokey and clap your hands. In, you put your tongue out, you put your tongue in, and you do the hokey pokey and clear your mouth. That is what it's all about. You put your head in, you put your head out, you put your head in, and you shake, 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 shake. You do the hokey pokey and try to stay.